Welcome to the Convict Podcast, folks. I'm your host, Moliere Dimash, and I'm Class A again. If you guys remember, there was an exhibit here in Orlando where they had my art up, and the curator requested to use an authentic prison uniform as an exhibit to be a part of the display, and I submitted it, and I just got it back, so we back on. This is part 2 of Surviving Keith Turner, and it's like reading a book, honestly. And I've always wondered about the women prisons. Like, in my mind, I guess because I'm a man, I always it's a fantasy at this point, but I always thought of women prisons as like so much more peaceful and nice than the men prisons. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, well, of course they're women, and we have female correctional officers here at the male prisons. Do they really allow men to work in the women's prisons? If so, it's only natural that you're gonna have sexual predators in there, and I don't know why that is. I wonder if there's a double standard. It's not an easy topic, but let's talk about this: the double standard. Is it sexual predatory behavior when a female guard has sex with a male inmate? Because I don't recall ever hearing of such a happenstance where there was a female guard accused of having sex with multiple inmates, and she was designated as a predator. Now, it's so hard because it's hard to discern this. You know what I mean? Because there's a realistic question: were any of the women involved here willing participants? And I say that not to take away from the fact that Keith Turner was a predator, because he was absolutely a predator. Don't get it twisted about that. But I think about myself. When I was a young man, I went to prison young, and I'm just gonna tell you, men have sex with female staff members all the time. With the same exact staff members. And, I was looking yesterday, I'm like, hold on, they were having sex with lieutenants and officers and food service workers. In the male prisons, that goes on a lot, I did it a bunch of times. Almost at every single prison that I went to, I had a sexual relationship with a staff member. And looking at it as me as a rape victim, it's like the last thing that would ever cross my mind. It was a blessing in my opinion. You know what I mean? So I just want to know, is it a different perception of sexual misconduct? Because if you're gonna call it misconduct, fine. Rape, I was never raped in prison. You know what I mean? And it was the same staff members: food service, nurses, officers, a captain. It's just, it's hard to say this without detracting from what the severity of the Keith Turner situation. So I just want to know, like, is it a double standard? Because the way that I look at it, from all of the reports that I've read, none of the women who were actually having sex with the officers filed any complaints. It was always other women who witnessed it that was telling. And in the male prisons, that would be inferred as snitching. You know what I mean? The male inmates who snitched on a staff offender relationship, they'd probably be put in the hospital the next day. I saw this continuously happening. So I just want to know, please let me know in the comments, how would you interpret that? With the female inmates who were putting these staff offender relationships, were they snitches or were they doing the right thing? because I can't think of a single instance in a male prison where, you know, there would be sexual encounters to where it would be interpreted as snitching. And, you know, from what I see, the women were gaining. They were. It wasn't like Keith Turner was holding them down and raping them. It was barter. It was, you know, I give you this for that. So it's hard, but, you know, when you look at it from his position of power, it could be manipulative. You know, he was a high-ranking official. You know what I mean? And these were inmates. So, you know, it's so many components to it. But I just want to know, is there ever a circumstance to where it's not rape or not generally considered that? So that's just a question. So I back to my perception of the women's prisons being peaceful. My general understanding was that women only faced the sexual problems that come with being a female, being overlooked by men, right? So as I'm reading these reports, I'm like, man, you know, what's up with some of the chemical agents and some of the cell extractions and the real beatdowns and, you know, some of the stuff that we go through every day at the men's prison? I found them. I definitely found them, and based on what I'm reading, that's reserved for black women. For real, like for any of the black women, former inmates who tune into this podcast, I have a newfound respect for you guys because y'all get it like the men. I mean, according to what I'm reading, you guys get the same treatment that we get, and you're actually getting some of the things we don't get because they're pulling off the impossible when it comes to the physical abuse of the black women. Because, you know, I like to put things in context, and I like to look at things in their totality. And it appears that with this specific staff member, and keep in mind, these are just the incidents that were reported. There are plenty of inmates who will get abused or women who would get raped and would not say anything about it. These were the brave ones, and it's still piled up. But, you know, it seems to me that with Keith Turner, he was pursuing sexual relationships with the white female inmates, and it was the black female inmates that were either putting it out there or they were the ones who were the subject of his abuse and confinement. They were the ones experiencing the abuse that I talk about the male prisons, like all of the videos that I talk about in the mysterious murders playlist, where, you know, they do cell extractions and they kill inmates. They use chemical agents and they kill inmates. That's what happens to the black women in the women's prison. So let's go down this, man. The list was so long, I didn't even get to half of them. But let's start off with Brenda Young. She's a senior citizen, and they orchestrate what they call an organized cell extraction. That's the one where, you know, they come to your door, tell you to cease your disruptive behavior and all of that. And that raised another concern for me. This is an organized cell extraction after they put the audio devices in the Florida confinement units as a result of my case law. So now I'm thinking, do the women's prisons have that? You know, I hope I didn't just do this for the men's prisons, because, you know, the only way they can get away with this is if there was no audio surveillance installed in the women's prisons. And if that's the case, there may be a nice playing field for a class action lawsuit on behalf of the women who were subjected to these chemical agents, these organized uses of force in the women's prison, because I don't see how they could do this unless there was deliberate and obvious procedural deviation from the rule. So they have this senior citizen in her room, and they say cease your disruptive behavior. Now, her actions are consistent with like old school stuff that I used to see. Like, we didn't have, before we had the audio surveillance, the only time you could be heard pleading your case is during the actual decontamination. Like after they gas you and they do all of this torture to you, they bring out a handheld camera. That's when they come to your cell, ask you to cuff up, and when you come out, they have to record you being taken all the way to the showers. And when she comes out, that's when she pleads her case. It's the only time her voice can be heard. Anything that the inmates say on the handheld camera has to be documented in an incident report. And she comes out and she says Lieutenant Turner was trying to kill me with those chemical agents. She couldn't breathe. It's mind-blowing that she survived this. Because remember in the other videos, I tell you, they hit you with the MK9. Now, correctional officers have come on this channel to try to demonstrate how harmless the crowd control Spencer is. Now, the MK9, that is crowd control. That's specifically for riots. And in these organized cell extractions, they use that much on a single person in the cell. And you mean to tell me this shit is killing grown men? And you mean to tell me they use this on a senior citizen? For real? Somehow Brenda Young made it. And she got it on the record that they were trying to kill her. The inspectors washed that away. They said, okay, well, it doesn't rise to the level of a crime. We're gonna forward this to the warden and treat it as an administrative issue. Now, I noticed that the warden that was responding to this stuff was Hope Gartman. And you guys got to remember, Hope Gartman was, she came from Swanee. We saw, I've talked about Hope Gartman several times on this podcast, asking her to help end inmate abuse is like asking Dylan Roof to help make churches safer. That's how it is. I mean, this is the last person. She puts together cell extractions. You know what I mean? She's a heavy proponent of inmate abuse, and she was the go-to person. And it's such a shame because as a woman, she should understand. She should have some type of sympathy for what these women are going through at the hands of men. And she's the worst person they could have asked for in these situations. So we move on to inmate Netgyne Morancy. Now, this young lady, they put her on the strip again. And now, I mean, it's so crazy. Now we get to talk about all of the stuff I've been talking about on this podcast, only about the black women. So I feel like I'm talking about a male prison right now, but they put Morancy on the strip, the 72-hour property restrictions, where they take your mattress, take your sheets, and they take your clothes. So she's in this cell with no clothes. She has nothing in this cell at all. Lieutenant Turner, apparently, and they did this to her twice. Lieutenant Turner organizes a cell extraction because she was on strip. That's the reason set forth in the incident report, that they had to do a cell extraction because she was on property restrictions. Now, this shit is so crazy. I want everyone in the audience to, really put yourself in the capacity of a correctional officer. Think about it like this. You put on the boots, put on those big silly looking boots that they wear. Put on your brown cargo pants, put on your brown shirt or your gray shirt. Brown shirt if you old school. If you new generation, put on your gray shirt. You're a correctional officer. Put on your little wraparound shades and, you even throw some snuff in there if you got to, but you're a correctional officer, right? You got all of this crap on your hip. You got your handcuffs. You got that MK9. Imagine you're in a confinement unit and you look in there and there's a naked woman on the other side of that door. Think of every possible reason that you could come up with as to what would make it necessary to go in there and pull her out of that cell. Why? What would get any reasonable answer? Just try to come up with it. She's naked in the cell. There's nothing in there that can even be moved. The metal bunks are bolted into the walls. She has no clothing to hang herself, nothing. She's in there naked. There's no food in there, nothing. It's just her, metal, and concrete. What could she possibly be doing to warrant you not putting... You have to organize a cell extraction team. You have to put on these vests and get the shields and get the helmets. You and 5 other people have to stand in line and go in there and extract her like you're the SWAT team, a naked woman in a room. Can you come up with anything? According to this report, the whole reason they organized this cell extraction was because she was on 72-hour property restrictions. That's not her fault. That's Keith Turner's fault. He's the one that did it to her. They go in there, and as you guys know from past videos, that's when they go in and they beat the inmates, pluck out eyeballs and break bones and all of that stuff. They go in there and they beat this young lady up. So they bang her head up against the ground and all of this stuff. And when they take her out of the room, guess where they put her back? In that same damn room. It's like, what was the point in taking her out? This was obviously specifically to mess her up. This was a vendetta. And the inspectors look at it and say, oh, it's an administrative issue. Now, like I said, Hope Gartman was the warden. And if you watch the Swanee Exposed segment, you know how she threatened inmates with cell extractions because of a vendetta. The assistant warden was L. Pippin. Netgyne Morancy. She was naked in the cell. They came in, banged her head up against the ground. Keith Turner banged her head up against the ground, and then they continued with the cell extraction. Next up, we have Loretha Hart, another senior citizen. They go and they pull off the cell extraction. And Keith Turner is doing this stuff so frequently, there has to be either there's only 2 explanations for how he's getting away with this. Either there's no audio surveillance in the female prisons and the confinement units, or the way that he's orchestrating it, he's not explaining it. Because when a captain or a lieutenant organizes a cell extraction or any use of force, they pull out the handheld camera and they're supposed to, identify themselves by rank and title. Then they put the camera on the inmate in the cell and give them an opportunity to submit to hand restraints. He's not doing that. I can tell by reading this, he's not giving them the opportunity. He's identifying himself and he's saying, this is what we're gonna do. And if the inspectors are allowing that to stand, the warden is allowing that to stand, they need to be in jail right now with him, or whenever he goes back. So Ms. Hart, she gets cell extracted, and she makes the allegation that when Keith Turner came in there with the cell extraction goons, he molested her. He grabbed her, below the waist, and he was feeling on her, and then he cut her with something. Again, no PREA number, no nothing. This is that's molestation. You know what I mean? And we're talking about a certified child molester. He molested this woman. They didn't take it serious. And she said this on camera. Remember, I told you, that's old school. When the handheld camera comes out, that's when you plead your case. She says all of this stuff on camera. They jot it down. The inspector say, it ain't serious enough. We're gonna give it to the warden. They give it back to Pippin and Gartman, who's gonna wipe up some coffee with it. So her case gets swept under the rug. Then we have Ayanna Brown, another cell extraction. So, I mean, it seems to me like he's shooting to kill these black women. He's shooting to kill because it's always cell extraction, back to back, cell extraction, back to back to back. And she knows the ropes too. When it's time to plead your case, do it on the handheld camera. Now, they don't say, just like with the cases with the men, they jump right into the cell extraction. We don't know if she was subjected to chemical agents or if she was already naked in that room or however he tortured her. They left all of that out. They just say that when the handheld camera came, she screamed he hit me. And then she goes into exposing him while the camera's rolling. And she talks about how this man preys on people. She gives us a little bit of insight into what it's like when Keith Turner comes into the dorm. She's saying that when he comes in and starts putting down on the women, he's always holding his penis. Like when he talks to the women, he's stroking himself. So she's saying that on her quad where she was living, anytime he came in, he was always stroking his penis through his pants, like what they call it back in the day, pocket pool. He's in there playing pocket pool, and he's walking up on these women, stroking himself. Now, if a woman's sitting on a bunk, like she's sitting like as I'm sitting, and somebody's standing there, you're gonna be face to face with their midsection. So if he's stroking himself and he's aroused, it's gonna be it's gonna be imposed on the women. How are they supposed to feel about that? So we move on to Jahmecca Jarvis, another one in confinement. So Miss Jarvis, they do an organized gassing, and there's no way. I'm now at this point. I refuse to believe that the audio surveillance has been installed at Lowell CI, and I'm going to personally look into that because that was that's on me. You know what I mean? That was that's a landmark piece of law that I left for the Department of Corrections to never forget me, and I'm going to be investigating that personally. So they do this organized gassing on Jahmecca Jarvis, and they take her out of the cell and all of this stuff, right? She said something of note during this organized gassing. When the handheld recorder's on, she speaks her piece. And they put down her specifics. They could have actually worded this to where they got her point across, but they put down her specific words where she told Lieutenant Turner, "You wouldn't have gassed me if I was a white hoe," quote unquote. So apparently amongst the black women at Lowell, they understand Turner's mode of operations. Abuse the black women, rape the white women. This was, at least from the perspective of Jahmecca Jarvis, that's what it was. You wouldn't have gassed me if I was a white hoe. So, it appears to be obvious because all of the women in the cell extractions are black women. All of the women being gassed and getting their heads banged up against the wall are black women in the confinement units. So they make special note of that. And, these are professional law enforcement officers, these inspectors. They know how to detect a pattern of something. And they took special note of that for a reason. They know he's having sex with the white women. They know he's beating the black women. So, let's keep going down this list. We have Shakeria Bargnare. And, this is indicative of, Turner's pattern of behavior. Shakeria Bargnare was in confinement, and there was another officer named M. Watkins, punched her in her face. Now, I've never seen this in a male prison, but apparently at Lowell, they have a chair where they strap the women down to, like a restraint chair. Now, I know about the chair because I've read about it in Chapter 33. If you want to familiarize yourself with prison protocol and the rules of the Department of Corrections, Chapter 33 is called the Prison Bible. So just read the whole thing if you got time. I've read about the chair. I've never seen one, being at the prisons that I've been to. But apparently they got it at Lowell. So I guess they're trying to get her into the chair, and Watkins punches her in the face. And after he punches her in the face, Lieutenant Turner comes behind him, picks her up, and does the same thing he did to Cheryl Wildmore. He body slams her and then shoves her into the chair. And I guess they strap her down. The man's a habitual body slammer because, prior to getting to all of the black women that he abused, I saw that he was, he was a habitual body slammer. Like he was like he was the Undertaker, like he was Chris Benoit or, Hollywood Hogan or Triple H. Doink the Clown, Bam Bam Bigelow. This man think he's a WWE wrestler, and he only does this to the women in the prisons. But I saw a lot of things. He was body slamming a lot of women left and right, and he was robbing them for their canteen. I saw those as minor compared to what I'm looking at now, and I'm gonna get to every single thing. But that was his MO: body slamming women and stealing their canteen, raping the white women, and brutalizing the black women in confinement. And he got promoted twice. Got promoted to sergeant and promoted to lieutenant. Remember, it's always the bad apples. If you ever see anybody in the Department of Corrections, the higher up in rank they are, you have to understand they're horrible people. They with Warden, Gartman's the warden. Pippin's the assistant warden. I mean, they've already been through this level. They've already been officers and sergeants and lieutenants and captains and majors and colonels. They moved up and they earned their stripes. You know what I mean? Mark Inch is no exception. Matter of fact, can we get a round of applause for Donald Trump? Donald Trump did what Ron DeSantis should have done a long time ago. He fired Mark Inch. Okay, he fired this man because he knew he was worthless. I mean, this man is cruel. Now, the bad thing about it, Mark Inch is not an elected official. We can't vote Mark Inch out of the Department of Corrections. But we better make this a referendum on any further political efforts that Ron DeSantis has, because he cursed us with this guy. He can be voted out of office. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, vote for the other Republican. Vote for the Democrat. Vote for the independent. Vote for the polka dotted wombat. But just get Ron DeSantis out of there. Mark Inch has to be the deciding factor in anything Ron DeSantis does moving forward. We have no choice at this point. We can't get rid of this man. Donald Trump was smart enough to do it. He got him away from the Federal Bureau of Prisons because he probably seen it from a mile away. But hopefully Ron DeSantis, he tries to be like Trump so much. Ain't nothing like him. But, follow his lead here. Since you want to copy Trump and everything he does, let's start with firing Mark Inch. Get him away from the Department of Corrections, man. Because, what sane person, what reasonable person, what righteous person would protect this monster? It's in your face. And, he not only tried to hide this from us, he tried to hide the man's identity. You know what I mean? And I see why now. He didn't want us to come up on any of this stuff. But this was dedicated to the black women who are former inmates. I had no clue. The male prisons are rough and tough. They're as rough and tough as it gets. And I always thought that men who survived those prisons intact, can poke their chest out a little bit. Y'all can too, because being a black woman in prison ain't no different than being a black man. Y'all don't even got to worry about the rape, apparently. At least not by one of the most high-profile rapists in the game. I hope more of this stuff gets out, because I'm sure there are tons of black women who do get raped. It's just that the officers that do that, they're a little more careful than Keith Turner. And they haven't been put in that spotlight yet. So we have to make everyone's personnel files public. That way we can get to the bottom of this stuff, whether they're in the spotlight or not. So this will conclude part 2 of Surviving Keith Turner. And black women, I am very surprised that you survived.